Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to Next Tribe Sunday Salon. We're downtown Austin, for those of you that are tuning in. We're at the Towers of Town Lake. A pretty good turnout today. Maybe some people have a little hangover from the game yesterday, who knows? But we've got Kim Barnes here today. She's going to talk to us about parenting aging parents. That is a topic that I'm sure each one of us in this room can relate to. We've either had an aging parent that we have to take care of, or it could be an aunt or an uncle, not necessarily a parent. Jennifer still has a lot of parents alive, so this is going to be very timely information for you. So I just want to thank you all for coming today. This is going to be kind of a casual setting. Feel free to ask questions as we go along, and Kim's also going to leave time at the end for everyone that's attending virtually to ask questions as well. And Kim, thank you so much for being here today. Sure. And I'm going to let her introduce herself and kind of give you her bio. And we can't wait to hear what you have to tell us.
Well, great. Well, thank you. You're welcome. Thank you. So glad to be with y'all, and then also with any of you that are joining us via Zoom. I will give you just a little bit of background, but I am a former television news reporter, news anchor, did that for a long time, did on-camera work. My husband and I have a business where we do media training, on-camera training, virtual communication, all of that kind of stuff. And truly, parenting aging parents started a little bit by accident. So I'm going to share a little bit about kind of where that came from and why, but it has become our passion and something that we really feel like affects so many people. And yet there's a lot of uncertainty, and it's a really challenging time of life. The last time that my husband went to go see his mom last month in memory care, the first words out of her mouth were, "Who are you?" The second words out of her mouth were, "Are you my brother?" And the third words out of her mouth were, "Why are you here?" And that's really hard when that's been the only mom you've had for 55 years, and yet that's how you're greeted. I was driving down the road on my way to a meeting when I got a phone call from, I looked on my caller ID, it's Prosperity Bank in Houston, because I'm on a first name basis with my mom's banker. And I answer the phone, and he says, "I just want you to know that your mom just called, and she was on her way in an Uber to the bank to take out some money for some gift cards that somebody had asked her to buy. I just want you to know I told her to turn around and call your daughter." Mom had almost gotten scammed again. So our moms are why we do this. That's why I'm here today, is because of the things that we have going on with both of them. And we feel like that these are topics that nobody really talks about, and we can't help each other if we don't talk about it. When Mike's sister and his sister were looking for memory care for his mom, his dad was agreeable. His parents have been married for over 60 years. His dad was agreeable and understood. And so when Mike and his sister went to go look for memory care, they thought, "Oh, we've got all the legal stuff figured out, the financial stuff figured out. This is like looking for an apartment, right?" Not really. When they walked into the memory care place, they realized, "Oh my gosh, what are we looking for? I have no idea. Are there red flags I'm supposed to be noticing? What is it how do I know this is the right place?" One of the ladies at one of the places went and gave my sister-in-law a hug, and she got a little emotional talking about their mom. And they left and they thought, "Well, that place seemed pretty nice." And while that was indicative, I believe, of the care that she gets, and she's been there now for a year and a half almost, and it's been a great fit for her, that's probably not the main factor that you should be considering when you're choosing memory care. But what we knew at the time is that we didn't think we knew other people really that were going through this. You know, when we have children, when we had our first child, when our son now who's 25, I had babysat a ton, so I knew how to change diapers. I knew how to do a lot. My husband didn't know a thing, but I'd never raised my own child. Everybody wants to give you insight, right? Everybody wants to give you advice, and it's so fun. And like, "Hey, here's what you do to get them to birth right," or "Here's, oh, they're not sleeping through the night. Here's some ideas." So everybody wants to share ideas. But in this stage of life, people don't talk about it. And again, we can't help each other if we don't talk about it. So that's why we are trying to normalize the conversation, because Kim had mentioned when we were talking earlier that it feels like we're all recreating the wheel. Why? This has been happening for a long time. When we can share experiences and insights, it's not always the exact scenario that you have, but we can all learn so much from each other and hopefully, cut down on some of that research or time, because most of us don't have a lot of the time to be able to do all of that. And the thing that's so interesting is that, just some of the statistics are pretty startling. The U.S. Census Bureau estimates more than 20% of the Texas's population will be 60 plus by the year 2030, which is a huge increase. More than 53 million Americans are providing unpaid care for an adult with health or functional needs. A lot. I mean, that's a huge number. I saw a study from 2020 that there were 41.8 million taking care of somebody 50 and older, because this may include also adults that are younger, but that still need some sort of care. They estimate that 60% of family caregivers of adults age 50 plus also work a full or part-time job. It's difficult to do that, to continue that. And there are people I know that in our group that have said they've had to quit their jobs because they can't manage doing that. Also, 79% of employers are not yet offering benefits to support caregivers caring for aging loved ones. A lot of the companies don't, a lot of companies talk about what are we doing with parents of young children, childcare, issues like that. And while some companies are trying to do more, there's not a whole lot of that discussion of taking care of an aging parent can be maybe not as time consuming, but it can be. It can take a huge chunk of your life, and yet we're not really talking about it. And also, we've never done this before. Our parents have always been the one, they're in charge. They're the adult. They're the one we go to when we have struggles or challenges or questions or need advice. And so we haven't really had to think that much because they're off living their life. They're taking care of themselves. My mom was playing tennis. She was playing bridge. I mean, she was doing all the things that she wanted to do until she wasn't. And in the meantime, what did I know about a broken hip or dementia or all of the other things that can kind of creep up? Sometimes they can creep up. Oftentimes they're an emergency because somebody falls or there's some sort of diagnosis or something like that. So, I've never really had to think about in my life as I've been raising my children, what should I do? What will we do? Have we had these conversations and that kind of thing? And so I think that, there's so, and what we are learning, there's so much to know. What's the difference between Medicare and Medicaid? Big difference. What's the difference between home care and home health care? Big difference. What's the difference between skilled nursing and rehab? There's all these words that we hear, and then you start throwing in the acronyms and the jargon. My husband's so funny. When he heard SNF first, he was like, Sunday Night Football. Yeah. I mean, does anybody know what some of these mean?
I know occupational therapy.
Occupational therapy.
Licensed practical nurse.
Yes.
Urinary tract infection.
Nobody
else knows about that.
Provider. Yes, primary care provider. Yes. And an SNF is actually called a SNF. It's a skilled nursing facility. So like, right.
Okay.
So, MLC is what's that one called? The CRCM is like continuum of care. I mean, there's all of these terms that when people start throwing it out, assisted living facilities, ALFF, QOL is quality of life. I mean, they just throw out these daily activities of daily living or ADLs. There's just all these different things that, like, that's just one more language to learn, right? And especially because you've never had to do this before. So we like to think that there are, certain things that you just I'd love to ask you, and I'll put it in the chat too, if you'd like. Do you know your mom's phone password? Yes.
No.
Okay.
Yikes.
Or computer password. Do you know your dad's
that's
cardiologist?
my mom's. Yikes. No, sorry.
Yeah. Do you know your dad's cardiologist name?
Yeah.
No. Okay. Do you know if they have a will, and do you know where it is?
Yes. My mom is adamant.
That's great. Yeah.
Every time I leave her, she's like, "You remember where my will is?"
Okay, interesting. Are they married?
Yeah.
Not married. Okay. And it's so interesting because, and just so you know, it's not uncommon. We see people in our group all the time that just say, I've talked to my parents about getting a will or wanting to know about it. And they're like, none of your business. You don't need to know. And that's the same thing with a lot of other things. And like and of course the hard part is that you don't need to know until you do. Yeah. And then
and then
sometimes
you really need it.
right. And then sometimes it's too late. So, you know, and did you know there's more than one type of power of attorney?
Yes.
There's a medical and there's a durable. The durable is a financial one that allows you to be able to, depending on how it's written, often it's to be able to like go on their behalf, pay their bills if they're in the hospital. You can sell property. You know, it just allows you to do some things that you can take care of if they become incapacitated, whether it's by injury, being in the hospital, or you know, or even with progressive dementia if they're considered. But again, that's something really important to know, like all the different kinds of forms. So we like to always share what are some of the, there's a lot to learn, but just to get basic, what are the main things that we want to make sure that we've had conversations about, that we've thought about, and that can help us be a little bit more prepared. A crisis may or may not ever come, but that way, if there is one, you can feel like I can focus on that crisis at that moment and not be scrambling, trying to think of, oh my gosh, how can I even find out what the doctor's name is because I don't have the medical power of attorney. They're not even going to talk to me. And mom can't make her own decisions. Do we have a medical directive? You know, what does she want to happen? And they're not listening to me because I don't have the medical power of attorney. And that is often, as we said, you know, when you need it, it's often too late to be able to get it. So a couple things that I always like to kind of think about is, this is not paperwork per se, but siblings. And I forget who we were talking earlier, that getting all the siblings on the same page, it's so important because it is so difficult. Yes. Because, you know, and while it seems obvious that you're like, oh, we need to talk about these things, the truth is that family dynamics are a funny thing. Personalities are a funny thing. And the things that might have been going on in your home as a child up until you left home, all of that stuff, whether it's like who got along better or, you know, these kinds of things, all of that stuff just comes crashing back. If there's been triggers, exactly. I mean, have y'all seen that where it's like either one sibling doesn't want to talk about it, the other one is trying to figure out, or one swoops in from out of town and says, oh yeah, mom's doing fine, she's great. And you're like, yeah, you don't see her multiple times because we live in the same city. So there's having those challenges. And frankly, you don't want to do things that ruin that relationship or after your parents are not here. So really being on the same page with them it can be really hard. One of the girls in our group told me that she called a sibling meeting with her brother and sister. So there's 3 of them, and the spouses were not allowed, which I thought was interesting because sometimes a spouse can be impacting potentially. I mean, sometimes there are spouses that like the wife of the son is the one actually doing all the work because she has the time and maybe has the skills. And, you know, so not that spouses are bad because they certainly help. And there's things that I, you know, do when they moved Mike's mom to memory care, my job was to stay with my father-in-law while he and his sister, my husband and his sister went to drop her off. So spouses are certainly involved, but they just said, we need to make sure that we are making decisions for our parents based on us as kids, not with other voices. And also what I have found too is playing to the strengths, because who does what better potentially? Who lives closer? And sometimes that has the proximity makes a little bit of a difference too. I know that with my mom, and maybe she's old fashioned, maybe it's because my brother is stern. She listens to things my brother says differently than sometimes I say it. So he can be the heavy a little bit more, but I'm still going to be the one that she calls when she can't get into her email. You know, and we're trying to get it out. I was laughing yesterday. I mean, I literally spent an hour of my life yesterday on FaceTime with my mom getting seasick because she kept like moving the phone around. Like, no, over this way. Trying to get her back logged in and her volume on so she could watch a video. But anyway, so we just know the different kinds of, so what are the things that we can do with our siblings that maximizes what we naturally are good at and maybe the relationship that we have. So the siblings is really, 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 really important. It can also be really, really difficult. Also, when you think about housing, you want to think about having these conversations before you need them, really. It's so much easier when it's sort of like, hey mom, just curious, have you ever thought about what you want to do when maybe you're not going to be playing tennis anymore? And you know, do you think it'd be fun? You know, the place where my mom lives is like living at the country club. There's activities, Trader Joe's brings flowers on Thursdays, there's water aerobics. It's looks pretty fun to me. They have movie night, 3 or 4 times a night, 3 or 4 times a week. My mom is a participator. She likes activities, so it's great for her. But she wasn't necessarily interested in that 4 or 5 years ago when I brought up the idea, and she was like, "Oh no, I'm not leaving." My brother and I thought, this is going to go really well. That's going to be really hard. And fortunately, it became her decision. Interestingly, it was because her brother suggested it, not us. So it's kind of figuring out again with that family dynamics, who might be the person that they'll listen to differently. It's not, maybe it's a trusted friend, maybe it's somebody from church, maybe it's a neighbor. There's just different ways to kind of investigate and try different things, because we just don't ever know what's going to work. But with housing especially, knowing what their desires would be, if in a perfect world, would you want to stay at home? For my mom, living at home by herself when she couldn't drive anymore sounded awful to me, because she couldn't go. She used Lyft for a little while, but after that, she was at home until a lot of times she was just sitting and watching television. She's not a reader. So for her personality, that was actually probably more problematic than her going somewhere else. Now, somebody else who's married and maybe a little more introverted, they might be quite happy living at home. So knowing what are their desires, but also what are they open to? If something happens to where you're not able, or that we're going to need to bring in 24/7 care, are you open to the idea of going to a community? Do you think sometimes, would you think it'd be fun to be able to go to have those activities? But just knowing what they're open to, because perfect world doesn't always play out in the way that you might anticipate. I don't know that my experience would have said, yes, I'm going to separate we're going to separate your parents who've been married for 61 years at the time, and you're going to live here, he's going to live in a totally different, a mile away. It's been really challenging, but they see that it's the best. I think for them, that's the best thing. I also think that one of the things that I found is that, especially by having thousands of people in our group, the hard part is that there's not a one size fits all. Because everybody's families are different. Everybody's financial situation is different. Everybody's guilt, whatever, we see that a lot in the group as well. So you just have to kind of know that, take what even today, take what you can from what I share and think of what's going to be good for us. But I'm going to throw out that other stuff, because that's not going to help. But one of the things we're thinking about housing as well is, when you think about what they're open to, if you start bringing in 24/7 care around the clock at home, it can be tens of thousands of dollars a month. Okay, do you know their finances? Can they afford that? If they can, and that's the way they want to spend their money, that's their choice, right? But just knowing their financial picture is so helpful. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to have bank balances to the penny, but do you even have a rough idea of what income they have coming in? Do they get anything but Social Security? Do they have pension? Do they have any savings? I guess a lot of them don't have 401ks particularly, because those were started later, but they may have pensions. Do they get veteran benefits? What do they have coming in? Because if you decide, they really say, hey, yeah, I think I'm ready to go to a community, and it's independent or assisted before it's medically necessary, that's cash. You pay for that. That's not covered by this not covered by Medicare until they medically need it. And this gets really complicated, and I'm still learning a lot of this myself. But you don't want to say, oh, great, Mom, I found this community down the street. It's only $4,000 a month. And they're like, well, I get $2,000 Social Security. Okay, well, who's making up the difference? Because they just don't have the savings. So just knowing kind of what that financial picture is, and kind of what their lifestyle and the care that they might need, is just really important. And again, not that you have to my father-in-law is an accountant. So we get, a very detailed financial statement, which is great, so that we have an idea of, yes, they can, his parents can afford to spend right now $10,000 a month on their housing, because the one's living in memory care and one's living in independent. It hit every month. It's like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I'm spending this much money. And we're like, well, thankfully you had worked hard and you had saved. So now we can keep doing that. Well, what the future holds, we don't know. But that's a lot of money.
I think that generation also. My mom has this thing in her mind that she has to leave us, money, so she doesn't want to spend all her money on herself. Mom, that's yours. If there's anything left at the end of the day, that's a bonus. I'm not trying to know that. she's always conscious. She
Yeah.
has to leave us all like one minute.
Oh, that's so sweet. And I also think to add on to that, a lot of them, you know, grew up in a time, and their parents lived through the Depression. So there are more budget conscious, if you will, or at least most of them. You know, I mean, again, everybody's different, but it's just important just to know that how can I best help, and do they have debts? Because that's going to create potentially a challenge as well. And then the fourth is legal. You know, as we mentioned, kind of, do you know what, do they have a will? Do they have a trust? Do they need one? Do they have a power of attorney? Do they have the medical directive? Do they have the HIPAA release? You know, all of those kinds of things, because it can get really complicated and messy if you don't have some of that stuff in place. Yeah, and again, thinking of, you know, in some ways too, we've had people in the group that have talked about, or even when we've done presentations, that, you know, when you can have a reason to start the conversation, like, hey, mom and dad, I just heard this presentation, which made me realize, wow, I haven't updated, this is a true story, I haven't updated my will since our daughter was born, and she's now 22. Huh, I probably should do that. So we just went and did that with our children, because we got a will as the responsible people when our son was born, but we realized we really had not ever updated it. But by being able to bring up like that personal situation that I'm going through, like, hey, I just realized we hadn't updated, which made me think about, you know, we haven't had that conversation. Do you have a will done? When did you do it? Is it 80 years, you know, is it 40 years old, or maybe not 80 years? Is it 40 years old, or have you done it? Have you updated it lately? You know, it just, if you can look for ways to bring up the conversation. And sometimes I think it's also figuring out, what are they afraid of in them? Because we had somebody in the group just yesterday that said they were afraid that they didn't trust the kids. And of course, we had one of the experts that we interviewed, because we do interviews with experts, who said something for the parent to figure out is that if they're going to trust you with that money after you're gone, but they can't trust you now, that's hard. But again, you bring up family dynamics, and there are ways that you can, from what we've learned, that you can word a POA, a power of attorney, that it doesn't have to, just because it's been signed, it doesn't mean it's active that moment. It can be. And like my mom's is, so my brother can come in and he can make some do transactions if he needs to, but it doesn't have to be that way. It could be activated upon whatever, you know, upon incapacitation, or a determinant by a doctor that you're not mentally capable, or whatever. So there's ways that you can protect it, but it can be in the safe, if you will, until it's needed, and as long as you know where it is in the combination, then that you can go and get it. Which also leads to passwords. And we kind of joked about that earlier. Do you know your mom's, or mom or dad's passwords? Do you know how to get into the computer? Because most computers now require a password to get in. Do you know how to, like, if they're in the hospital, can you pay their mortgage bill, or their phone bill, or their whatever, you know, their electric bill? You know, if you can't do that, if you have a power of attorney, you can still kind of work around it. But even if you have that, it's still just much easier to go into the online account and pay the bill. So much easier.
So in a way, it moved into some of the right checks.
True.
We're trying to get it.
But there has to be a person on her account that can sign those checks.
Or your fortune. Yes. Yes, right. Exactly. So yeah, it'd be better to be assigned. It'd be better. Yeah. Weren't you signed here with those like in high school? Like, yeah, she missed today because she wasn't doing yeah, maybe don't want to use that. But yes, being a signer on account, that's another layer of things that you can do. Creating beneficiaries on accounts and things like that. But the interesting part is that a lot of people don't realize the power of attorney ends, and your authority ends when the person passes away. It's not good anymore. It ends when that person dies. So if you need to go into that bank account because you need to pay for expenses until that, depending on how, and this is all, and I'm not an attorney, but once that, whether the will has to be probated or it's in trust or whatever, until that money is moved over, you can't, or you're a signer on the account or a beneficiary on the account or whatever. It's complicated. The power of attorney, the authority with that ends when the person dies, which is something I didn't realize before. Yeah. Because if you read it, it's designed to take care of them while they're alive. And then the minute that happens, the will or trust or whatever else kicks in. So, but the passwords are so important. I mean, I personally, the way I use a lot of passwords is I go in and I check my mom's balance. I go in and check the credit card. I get an alert anytime someone gets charged on her credit card because she's been known to give money out over the phone. Fun fact, this is only happened with one political organization. What's funny is that if you call the number that's on the credit card statement, that answers it, so there's one particular that process them for certain types of candidates. So it's a clearinghouse. You call that number and you listen for the prompts, it'll say, if you'd like a refund, press 4. So it's concerning to me that there must be enough people that call with that question that they just, we'll do a one-time blah, 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 and you give them your name, the person, and they refund the money. So fortunately, you get the money back. But the sad part is that you cannot talk to a person on the phone. I tried. You cannot get a person on the phone. And so just a little fun fact, if your parent tends to make political donations that they don't remember making, then that's a way to get around. So at least give you your money back pretty easily. But and one of the other things I do is I go into my mom's email account at least usually twice a day if I can, so that I can try to delete all that spam she gets, because it is ridiculous the amount of spam, and they're getting trickier and sneakier every single day. Because do you not get text messages or emails that you're like, I don't think I made that purchase, because they make it so legit. Yeah, and they're able to cloak sometimes they can even cloak the email address, which I'm trying to teach my mom. Okay, who does it say it's from? Oh, it says it's from PayPal. Okay, who's it really from? Like, that's their email address that it really is. I can make that say it's from Santa Claus if I want to, but who's it really from? Oh, it's from JW737@gmail. I'm like, that is not PayPal. That is not PayPal.
So getting texts, it's like, your Amazon order, we've detected, we've got a bit of a problem clicking into resolve.
Yes.
Yeah.
And my mom, do you know?
I know.
So sneaky.
Yes, they're so sneaky, and you just have to think, if we have to give it a second look, our parents. Yeah. So we've taught our parents, don't click on anything. So we get emails forwarded all the time, both from Mike's dad and from my mom. Okay, should I do something? Should I do? No, it's a scam, Mom. I know it's probably a scam, but I'm gonna send it to you anyway. Okay, gotcha. But I go in, and that just alleviates so many just potential challenges, because I can go in and just delete those spam. I get things marked so that they go straight to trash if I can't unsubscribe, because a lot of places you can ask 500 times, they do not unsubscribe you, or they don't give you that option. So knowing their passwords is just super important if you need to jump in and be able to help them. There was a story in our book, in our Facebook group, about somebody whose father passed away. It took them about 5 months to get his phone turned off, because they had to have a death certificate and blah, 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 and do all this stuff. Where had they had this plug-in, they could have just gone in and closed the account. So just, maybe we're not supposed to do that, but it sure is a lot easier. So just like that, just knowing some of that can be really, really helpful. And because of all this, my husband was the one, when he came back from looking for memory care with his sister, he came home and he just said, if we felt prepared and we're still this overwhelmed, I can't imagine how most people feel. I think we should do something. And this was about 3 years ago, truthfully, and and to be totally honest, I just said, it's really not fun stuff to talk about. And we were pretty busy doing on-camera training and all that during COVID, because everybody was on camera. So we kind of put that to the back burner for a while. And then what happened is that when we moved his mom to memory care in March of 2021, he posted one thing on social media. And what I noticed was, of course, there was a lot of empathy. But what I really picked up on were the numbers of people who said, I've already done that. I'm in the middle of that right now, or I see it coming. And not just Alzheimer's, but anything with your aging parents. And I turned to him and I said, okay, you're right, because nobody's talking about this. And how can we help each other if we don't know what's going on? So we started with the Free Private Facebook group. We thought, well, we're both former journalists, so let's do interviews. That's what I love to ask questions. And while I didn't used to think I'd like to talk about Medicare and learn all the details, it's actually very fascinating and confusing. So we do interviews, and we have 55 plus, I think, now on our website of all different kinds of topics, just to try to help people understand what are the questions to ask, what are the terms to use, or what does sniff mean, and all of that kind of stuff, just to try to help people understand. And because of it, and because of the having all these people together, we see the most amazing things happen. There was a woman in our group who, it was summertime, her mom has Alzheimer's, her 90th birthday was coming up. She wanted to take her mom to the beach. It's her favorite place. It's always been her favorite place to go. And she posted in the group, but she's wheelchair bound. Does anybody have any ideas? Somebody in the group who she didn't know said, hey, did you know at Port Aransas, there's a wheelchair, and there's a water wheelchair that can go in the water that you just reserve. Didn't even cost any money. And so she looked into it, and a couple weeks later, she shared this picture of her mom in the beach with just like it just gives me chills. And they got home. Mom didn't remember she'd been at the beach, but her family, and she passed away not long after that. Her family has these memories, like it almost makes you tear. Her family has these memories they will never forget, because I feel like that's pure joy, you know, and that was only brought together because of somebody else in the group had a little tidbit of information that they were able to share. And that's the kind of stuff that we see in our group all the time. And we just, you know, have people that just like, you know, I love that somebody said like, this is like oxygen, you know, for those of us out of breath. I mean, we just find that people, because we don't talk about it, we don't think our friend's going to understand, or our neighbor, so we just don't usually talk about it. So when you can be in a place where other people are going through similar challenges, it just makes you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. And that's because we heard so much about people thinking, I must be, we would laugh that, okay, well, I'm in one room, Mike's in another room, I'm talking to my mom about some medication. No, don't touch that. The caregiver's going to go in the pillbox. Don't take anything out of the cabinet. Mike's on the other room talking to his dad about, hey, don't click on that link. No, whatever. And I just thought, oh my gosh, this is in the middle of the workday. Surely nobody else is going through this yet. We are. Right, we are.
All the time.
Yes, exactly. So we created the Caregiver's Key, which is a book that it's kind of selfishly made for me, because I have all these loose pieces of paper and sticky notes and all that we created. It's just like a little workbook that, you know, we made just to like fill in all that information we talk about that you need to know.
That's fun.
That's awesome.
That's something that we have that we created and put together. And, you know, it's just, we also realized too that we didn't know, now we know that Mike and his sister could have used an agency that helps you figure out the right place for your parents. They have them all over the country. A couple of them are working. We have a sponsor that is one of those companies, and they can help you do it. And it's a free service. Well, we didn't know that, because I feel like something happens and you think, okay, I don't even know what I'm looking for. What service or provider, but as the adult child, you don't know what they're called. And so what we're also doing a lot at is helping people connect, because if you need a service that can help you find the right place, or if you need a person who really understands Social Security or whatever, that there are services and providers out there that can help you if you just can find a way to look. Exactly. So we are just so thrilled to be being able just to kind of lead the way to normalize the conversation, help other adult children get prepared so that we can enjoy, like I know you mentioned, Vanessa, that you feel like it's your privilege to get to spend this time with your mom. And we can enjoy that time much more when we're not having to worry about all that other stuff that's stressing us out and all of that. So it's a free private Facebook group. We'd love, if anybody feels like they could use that support, just join. And if you go to the website, that's where we have the 50+ interviews that are available. And then there's a button right on the homepage that says join the community. And you can go right to the Facebook group. Ask you a couple of questions just to make sure you're a real person. Or so that, because I'll tell Mike if anybody wants. Yeah, no, right. Yeah, we've had a few kind of wacky, we have to watch a few, there's been a few weird things. Somebody joined last week, it was like, looked pretty legitimate. And then she was commenting like something about, make sure your kids aren't in the oven. We're like, okay, that, like, I don't know why people, anyway, that's a whole thing. What things are people getting out of that? I don't know. But anyway, but I'd love just to see if anybody has any questions or experiences that you've had, or something that because I feel like we all have a tidbit here or there of something that you've done or tried that worked with your parent that we could learn from each other. And same thing is, are there any questions in the chat?
Not yet, but they can't hear these questions. So if you could just repeat them.
Yes, of course. Yeah, so does anybody have any questions?
I came with one thing in mind, and that is I'm looking for help with a script of how to talk to mom about if I really respectfully, compassionately, lovingly believe it's time to let other people, more people take care of you. And she is so.
She just wants family.
She does not want to move, and she doesn't want anybody else in the house. And I need help with some scripting. I have an appointment this coming week. A way to get her through the door is because I had to place my dad, who has Alzheimer's, in a community 7 weeks ago because she had a medical emergency and I had to spend 4 days in the hospital. My husband spent the time with my dad at home. That was how I got my dad placed, but she couldn't give up taking care of him and was killing herself doing it until the emergency happened. I was slightly prepared, but not as prepared as I wanted to be. And so I don't know if I have to just kind of push through the resistance and say, Mom, we've got to have this icky conversation. I know you don't want to, but.
I think that's hard. That's really hard. And truthfully, the way that the progression to Mike's mom moving to memory care was precisely because Mike's dad had COVID, was in the hospital, and Mom was at home. And he realized we can't do that. So there are a couple of interviews on the website that talk about having tough conversations. We also both did an interview with our parents talking about their move to my mom to independent living. Mike interviewed his dad, talked a little bit about independent living, but also with Mike's mom moving to memory care that might would help. The thing that I've seen from just so many different conversations is one, kind of knowing what will not get her attention, right? But what's the best approach for her?
Right.
Is it because she wants to make sure that she's not a burden to the kids? Is it because she's just scared and she doesn't want to give up the independence? Is it because she feels like I can afford to have somebody at home or whatever? But there have been many conversations within the community and in our Facebook group about this exact issue because it's very, very common where parents are like, no, I'm good. And they're like, not so much. That's because I'm doing everything for you. And I can't, so some parent maybe when they realize I'm going to have to quit my job to be able to take care of you, which is going to mean that I don't have I don't have the income that I need, or I'm not going to be able to stay in my house or whatever. One parent may be thinking, oh, well, that sounds terrible. I don't mean for you to have to give up your entire life to take care of me. There may be another parent who's like, oh, okay, well, sounds great. So, that's the hard part is you have to kind of figure out what, like, is she like a give me the facts kind of person? And here I'm laying out the options and the ideas and here's why. Or do you have to feel more emotionally? So I think some of it is having to know your parent. But there's a couple of interviews on the website that might be helpful about having those tough conversations. Yeah, because it's not easy. Yes.
And this is, I think, a general situation a lot of people go through. So in lieu of, talking to people, convincing them to do things, what do you do in a situation where someone's they're literally in danger, but they're confident to make decisions for themselves, but they refuse to move and they're one step away from disaster and they just barely avoid a disaster? What do you do? I mean, there are agencies, there are police, but when they say no and they're confident, but they're one step away from disaster, what do you do? Where is the support?
It's really hard. Yeah, it's really hard because it's, in many ways, this is like a toddler or a teenager. You see that toddler heading for the stove to touch that burner, and sometimes you can't get her fast enough. Right. And so in many things that if you've had teenagers, it's having to think in many ways the same, where you're trying to help them make a good decision, but it needs to be their decision. And actually, you reminded me when you said convincing, one of the most recent interviews we did is actually called How to Convince Your Aging Parents. And some of it is figuring out what is behind it. Like, what are you afraid of? Or what is really, is it really that they don't want to move and they have too much stuff? Or is it because they don't want to give up their independence? What's really, are you just scared? Or is it really that what's the emotion behind it? But I think that, and I've seen this in the group sometimes where you can call adult protective services if you feel like they're in danger. If they come if they come and see, well, I guess they have a little food in the refrigerator or whatever. And
the standard is so low.
Right.
No, I say
Right,
that.
right. No, it probably is. Right, right. Because they want to keep people out of the system, if you will.
Well, yeah.
Right. So I think that, there's kind of almost not, there's more than one way. One way is if they're competent, that's going to be the challenge because you can't do guardianship and all of that stuff if they're competent. Even though you don't want to do guardianship unless it's the very last resort. It is so complicated, so expensive. Yeah, it's awful. But the other part is that we've seen some of the group too, is that if you appeal to them, sometimes you have to step back. Just like think about teenagers. Sometimes you have to sometimes let them fail and fall on their face and be there to pick them up, be there to pick them up, which is so hard. And it's in a weirder way with parents, I think, because the kid's just probably going to skin their knee and they'll be fine. The parent stays at home, falls, breaks her hip, and that could lead to them dying. So I think, yes, no, absolutely. So the stakes are so high, but I think also you have to do what at some point you're doing everything that you know how to do, and if they don't want to do what you think is right, how do you decide? And that's something that everybody has to decide on themselves as far as I'm gonna have to step back because I can't stress about you living at home because, and this may seem harsh and just depending on the situation, but if you're not gonna do what I think is best, and I see you in a very dangerous situation, it's almost like I can't be part of encouraging you to do this. But that's right, I know, but it's so easier said than done, so hard. Are there any questions in the chat? No. But I think that the bottom line is I think that when we can find people like to bounce ideas off of or have that community that can help one, make it not feel so alone. And sometimes you just get that little spark of an idea that can give you that great smile in the beach, in the beach wheelchair, or help you have a hard conversation that you don't know how to have. It's not easy, but I think that we have to talk about it too. Okay, good. Does anybody feel a little bit more like?
Okay. Yes, very good. So very
good. Right, because
that's such a great resource too.
Yeah. How do I get my hands on that?
Oh yeah.
We actually have. They're at the. We sold out of all the ones that we had. We have. They're at the printer right now being. Updated one being printed. So we have a physical version. There's a digital version also. And we do have a little paid membership that we have that we just kind of started not too long ago. That's for people who want additional resources. And the first perk you get is you get the digital version for free. It's nice. So that's kind of a pretty big. We do some extras, Q&As and things like that. And we're working on some discounts and things like that for people. So
that's all on the Facebook.
It's all right? It's all on the website.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you can go join the Facebook group from there.
I have another question.
Yes.
I really liked how you were talking about trying to get all the siblings on the same page. In our modern society, there can be multiple divorces, multiple marriages, and multiple stepkids. And that's a whole different dynamic when somebody's married in and maybe you're like second or third set of stepkids. And what advice can you give to people out there who are in that situation, and what have you encountered?
Probably leave it longer. Setting that stuff up as you're going. We had somebody in the group that was saying their 80-year-old parent was wanting to get remarried and blah blah blah. And they're like, okay, I know when my mom got remarried, she was probably 60. My brother was like, you have to have a freedom. And so there's things like that. But obviously, if that wasn't taken care of, caregiving.
Yeah, the caregiving in the will and.
Those are there are
odd things.
There are. We actually did an interview with a mediator. That's pretty interesting, where he talks about how do you get everybody kind of on the same page, because it may be that you need to bring in an outside person, and it could be somebody. It could be the pastor at church. It doesn't have to be a mediator. Could be, but it might even just be somebody who's a good old family friend that everybody recognizes as somebody who has this parent. The aging parent has in their best interest. But absolutely. And I think that, somebody even told me one time too, they're like, I'm an only child. So that while it's really complicated when you have lots of, kids and inner workings and remarriages and stuff, you know, which is kind of a whole other little animal. Being an only child can be really hard because you don't have anybody to bounce ideas off of, and you don't have anybody to share the burden in the right word, but the challenge. You know? Yeah. So, but I think that probably it's finding somebody, trying to have a meeting to get everybody together and talk. And if there are people aren't agreeing, because a lot of times, you know, again, if they love that parent, whether they're a step kid or not, and they, you know, maybe there's a step kid that has, you know, has worked in as a nurse or has worked in social work or whatever, has some strengths to be shared. But I think it's really just trying to get that good communication, which is so important in everything that we do, right? You know, good communication. So, well, thank y'all so much.
Thanks.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you, Kim.
No, of course, it's my pleasure. My pleasure.